Welcome to the only wrestling podcast that covers the WWE developmental system from its inception to modern day. From OVW to MCW, the HWA, Deep South, FCW, and much more. Hosted by Brian Asbury and Mortimer Blankenship. Now let's dive into what could have been, what should have been. Welcome to Developmentally Speaking.
Hey, before we get in this episode, can you do us a favor? Will you go ahead and subscribe to the channel?
Will you ring that notification bell?
And if you would, give this video a like. Well, enough of that mumbo jumbo. Let's get to the episode.
Let's talk developmentally speaking, glow up, and connecting through wrestling.
Hey everybody, I'm Morty.
And I'm Brian.
And on today's episode of Developmentally Speaking, we have Mayor Matt Morgan. Matt, how's it going?
What's going on, guys? Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for coming on. It's an honor for me and Brian. Growing up in Southern Indiana, watching OVW and everything, it's definitely an honor. So
the Blueprint was a big part of our childhood.
I want to ask you the same question I ask everybody starting out. What made you want to get into professional wrestling?
I can tell you when. It was the night that Andre, actually came on during the daytime, but it was the day that Big John Studd and I believe it was Ken Patera cut Andre the Giant's hair. And his no good partner, SD Jones, gets shit canned over the top rope, right? And sells that the entire time, just being tossed over the top rope the whole time, while poor Andre's getting his hair cut. And I remember, that was my dad's guy. My dad's guy was Bruno, but then also Andre. So that was a really big deal in our household, me and my brother and my family and everybody. So that really resonated hard with me. And that was the first time I emotionally invested in a TV character of any sort. God, I don't know how old I was. I couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. I'd like to think. But that's when. From that moment on, always glued to the television, wanting to watch pro wrestling over and over and over and over again.
For those that don't know, how did you get your start? What was it that made you actually pursue this?
Little complicated, but you can't go into your boys and girls club and say, hey, show me a steel chair. All right.
Right.
I got very hooked on traditional sports, basketball, baseball, football, and I played college basketball on scholarship. And then when I graduated college, I was bouncing at a bar at 2 jobs, and then my second job was to bounce at the bar at nighttime. And in walked a guy that wrote for WWF Monday Night Raw magazine. His name was Marco Torelli. Good dude. And Marco asked me if I ever thought about being a wrestler. I was like, well, duh, yeah. I love watching it, but how does one become one, And so I didn't know there were schools and things like that. I just assumed they plucked, former pro athletes and things like that. I didn't know. And I'm from Connecticut. I'm 2 towns over from Titan Towers. Keep this in mind. So he gets me in Titan Towers gym every Friday night with the goal of bumping into Vince McMahon. And at this time, I'm humongous. I'm legit 382 pounds, the biggest I've ever been. Mostly fat, but just enormous. And finally, after 6 months of going every Friday night, I met Vince McMahon. I also met Jim Ross's wife, his late wife, Jan. I met Stephanie McMahon. I met tons of Tom Pritchard. And a long story short, they all, telling me, how I can get involved. So when it came to finally meeting Vince in that gym, he's like, well, hold off on all that because we're doing a reality show on MTV called Tough Enough. And so, long story short, I got through and I got started by being on MTV Tough Enough season 2. That's technically how I got started. And try to wrap it up as quick as I can. Lost Tough by when I got hurt on the show because again, I told you I was a fat ass. I was way too overweight. Because in my head I thought these wrestlers were really the weight and the height they say they were. I didn't know that was a gift. I'm like, I'm bigger than Undertaker, right? but it was unhealthy. It was so unhealthy for me. And anyways, long story short, that's how I ended up getting started. I got booted off Tough Enough because I tore my knee again, way too overweight in my opinion. And they still signed me to a developmental deal anyway. And best time of my wrestling, my favorite time easily was Ohio Valley. Every wrestler was.
Oh yeah. Talking about how they they gimmick the weight. I've been doing wrestling for a while as a manager, but I do wrestle matches every now and again. My build weight is wouldn't you like to know? So, so I can only imagine what that means in actual pounds.
So how was that transition down to Louisville from Connecticut?
A great one actually because I had lived in Hawaii. That's where I went to college.
Hmm.
I lived well, so Hawaii is a great melting pot of all different shapes, sizes, makes, and models of cultures, and it was really good for me because when I got to Kentucky, I loved it because everybody there was so kind. Everybody, I'll never forget this. I got a flat tire right off of Taylorsville Road, and the guy that lived there came outside, helped change the tire with me, and then had me come into his house to eat with his family. It was like I was like, holy crap! I think that's what they mean by Southern hospitality. I remember telling my family up north,
Oh
and
yeah.
I fell in love with that place from that day on. Even when I got called up on the road to do SmackDown and all that other stuff, and I was no longer having to go to developmental, I still lived there because I love that place.
Hmm. That's a common theme with everybody we've interviewed is that there's a special place in their heart for Louisville, for the Davis Arena. OVW was the best time of their life, of their career.
And I go a little bit further back. So technically, my first day at OVW, I started at the old Davis Arena, in Annapolis. That's the one that prototype Cena, Brock, Shelton. That's where they all cut their teeth in that building.
Hmm.
You know.
Wasn't quite what the Davis Arena is today.
Oh,
Hmm.
listen, we helped paint that. Those rides still there or not or whatnot, but we painted those. Um, I'll never forget that. Painted the stairs. Did a lot of work on that place, and we were very proud of it.
As you should. I've always thought that the Davis Arena was always a special place. I took Morty beginning of this year. We got invited to go down, and it was his first time in there to experience it.
Cool. Very cool.
I'd always watched it on television and um, on Channel 7 when I was younger. And then whenever they had the house shows come to Seymour, Indiana, I would watch those shows, of course. And but I never got a chance to actually travel down to Davis Arena. And it definitely it has a feeling to it there. You feel the connection to the wrestlers and the all the action. You actually it's just I guess the word would be intimate. It's more of like an intimate wrestling
Hmm.
setting to where you're just there. I'm sure you can agree with me on that when you talk about
Well,
OVW in general.
between that arena and the old Davis Arena, people give them well. Actually, they did get more. I was gonna say they need to give Cornette and Danny Davis more credit, but I just think about it, they did because OVW would win TV Show of the Year all the time. I remember with the Observer because the way they shot that show as well, besides the good storylines and besides playing to all of our strengths and hiding our weaknesses, nobody was better at Jim Cornette than that.
Hmm.
But as far as how they shot the show, even in the old Davis Arena, if you guys saw that old Davis Arena, you'd be shocked at what it would look like in person. If you were
Yeah.
taking the one on Taylorsville Road in Louisville today, like, well, that's pretty small. It has nothing compared to the closet that was the one in Indianapolis. You would know because of how intelligently they always shot their shows.
Hmm.
You know, super smart.
For sure. So how was the your beginnings in OVW?
Good, amazing. I loved it. I was surrounded by people because at the time this was a lot of the WCW guys that
Hmm.
didn't have it, but were on Nitro all the time, like Jack O'Hare. I did have Cena in my class early on when I started. Um, and some of the others that I'm a huge wrestling fan, like I told you earlier. So I knew who all these people were.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the internet popular as it is today, obviously, but I was the kid in the computer lab all day. You know, missing classes when I probably shouldn't have been, but nonstop looking up who the next NWO member is going to be, and blowing up the computer all day in my college dorm. And so I knew who these guys were. So I was, big eyed when I first got there to finally be around them, and then saw, like Batista, who was playing the character Leviathan back then, was one of the biggest human beings I've ever seen in my life.
Mm-hmm.
From a muscle standpoint, I mean, he's he even explained to you how much bigger he was then by the time he got to SmackDown and what you saw in Deacon Batista. The Leviathan was way bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Scary, right? But I loved it. I got a lot of good. A lot of them were very helpful. Cena would come in there with me, Johnny Jeter, Mark Magnus, or sorry, Mark Capani, Chris Cage, and on Saturdays after the beginner class, he'd get in the ring, or before the beginner class, I should say, he'd get in the ring with us and do blow up drills with us and things like that. And if you wanted to get in the ring at any time, you could. And I love that. Love Danny Davis. Love Jim Cornette still to this day with all my heart. I owe a lot to both of them, along with Rip Rogers as well. Um, they did a ton for me. The house in front of me right now that Yvonne just pulled into the driveway at. Not that I'm driving, folks. I'm just sitting in my car. But we started this right when I arrived in my driveway. I owe that all to them. They bought my cars, my home. They helped me make a living from me and my eventual family, and I'll always love them for it.
We started doing conventions to help promote the podcast, and we've started taking Rip Rogers with us to these, and we've
Yes.
learned a lot in the car and there, and oh, any good Rip Rogers stories?
My damn protein bars. No, just the stuff you guys have already heard, and I'll tell you a positive, not necessarily a funny one, but a good one. He made us do to be prepared. Obviously, his gimmick was we need to be overly prepared, be overly ready. They throw anything at you, you can do it. So be prepared for anything. So with that said, he made us all very comfortable being able to call a match on the fly with no discussion, no rehearsal, nothing. And he put me in the ring with, I'll never forget this, Jackie Gata. And he made us switch characters. So now Jackie Gata, 7 foot tall, Matt Morgan. I'm Jackie Gata and rolls. And so I remember taking her hand and putting it on my neck, choke slam from her. And yeah, everybody laughed and it was funny. But my point was, and not that I was a fan of this character, obviously, but when years later came and Vince pitched me with the stuttering character, people are like, why would you say yes to that? Because I was trained that way. I was trained that they say jump, you say how high. And Vince McMahon comes up with a character for you, no problem, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that.
Oh, you're good.
And you know what I mean? Overly prepared us. So I know it's not a funny story about Rip, but there's millions of them out there. Come on. Other than
No,
him.
Oh yeah.
Other than him.
any rip story tends to be a good rip story. So,
But, but not
funny or not.
but not enough people will say how. I mean, I hope it's different. I hope people do give him his props and his praise on what an incredible trainer he was. He might not have been corporate, but who cares? He could take anybody, literally anybody, and make them comfortable with being able to wrestle a full match and
Mm-hmm.
call everything. Today's day and age, wrestlers are incredibly talented. They're incredibly athletic, right? But to be able to call a match on the fly, predicated on how the crowd's responding,
Mm-hmm.
right then, how many of them can still do that right now?
It's,
Not a lot.
it's true. When we took him to the Squared Circle Expo in Indy, the amount of people that came up and just like
Yeah,
showed him love, and I think he needed that. Like Mickey James came over, John Morrison, the APA, just everybody came to our table and just talked to Rip the whole time. And I think he needed to feel that again. Like he is very appreciated by everybody.
should he needs
Mm-hmm.
to be. Same needs to be said for Jim Cornette too.
How was working with Jim Cornette? I'm sure he loved the stuttering gimmick. I'm sure he.
Before that, before that, he was another one that I was in the very beginning very wide-eyed around because I was an enormous wrestling fan, enormous. So I grew up in Connecticut. Keep in mind, so you would think I'm only gonna be able to see on TV, WWF and believe it or not, WCCW, and a
Mhm.
little bit, AWA, a little bit of NWA and whatnot. But I had tons of tapes, and um, was a tape trader, and I Cornette was my guy. As far as managers go, right? Him and Bobby Heenan were like the most entertaining things on the planet to me. But so now to be under his tutelage, if you will, and
Mhm.
I was very wide-eyed around him in the very beginning until the first time I messed something up, and I'm a former college athlete. So when Jimmy would dig in your ass over something, I would never go complain about it and whine about it. Like, he was
Mhm.
mean to me. I thank him for it because he just made me better. He just made sure that I'm not going to make the same darn mistake I just made the night before so I can hold up the television and make some money for my family. I'll always be indebted to him for that. And not to sound corny, I always thought of him like a father figure, honest to God, a father figure. Because even when after WWE was done, and I went to New Japan, worked for both All Japan, New Japan, and Hustle, made great money over there. Um, Jim was, trying to, sing my praises to Jeff Jarrett and TNA because he had started with them at that time.
Mhm.
And Jim and then Dutch Mantel both kind of, and Jeff Jarrett as well. Finally, TNA. And but that's all in the very beginning by Jimmy at all their TV meetings. I'd hear this years later after I was with TNA that Jimmy, was nonstop like, hey, you really need to sign this Matt Morgan kid. Trust me, you won't be disappointed, kind of thing. And he doesn't have to do things like that, right?
Mhm.
So again, I'll never, I can never say enough good words about him or what he meant to me. Love him to death.
Awesome.
I, the blueprint was always a big part of my childhood, and I loved your time in OVW. I remember when you lost, and they said you'll never see your face again, and then you came back with a mask.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. No, that brought it back memories. Yeah. I remember being so happy because I mean, as a kid, I what I didn't like Matt Morgan because that's what I wasn't supposed to like him.
Right.
And like I remember never see your face again, and I fell for it. I fell for it so hard. I was like, yes, and then a mask, and I was like, shit.
There was this time I got called, so I got called up to SmackDown onto Team Lesnar for Survivor, and right away they put me in the ring with Big Show, which was a big mistake. That was stupid. You don't bring your giant up to television and put him one giant that's bigger than you, right? That was stupid.
Right. That that's weird booking.
Not smart. Like, again, not to just sit here and ride Jimmy here or anything, but like you would never, Cornette would never be called dead booking something like that, right? He would keep giants as far from each other as possible for as long as possible and make you pay to see even what they would look like in the ring in a face-off, let alone being physical with one another, right?
Mhm.
And that day, but whatever. Um, Anyways, so Nathan Jones ended up being my tag team partner. We were slated to win the world tag team titles at WrestleMania 20. Nathan ends up quitting. I don't know how far before that, but pretty well before that, while we were on tour in Australia. Long story short, after WrestleMania 20 came and went, they sent me back down to Louisville for more seasoning, which was never an insult to me because I got called up after like almost 9 months or 10 months of total training. They shouldn't have
Mhm.
called me up that to begin with. The bigger the guy, the more seasoning he needs. And so I wasn't trying to rush to get out of there, But what do? Tell him, no, I'm not ready, Vince? No, of course not. You have. And so when they sent me back down, it was really good because Jimmy was going to be able to work with me on being a heel now and working because until then, I was as big as babyface my first time in OVW. When I became OVW champion and all that other stuff, I was a babyface, not a heel. Um, uh, Long story short, again, I end up doing the loser, has to leave town or no show your face, thing. That I start wearing a mask because uh, had told them, and Stephanie too, that it would be really good for Matt to work on his body language while he's down there, and putting a hood on him will help him develop his mechanics and his body language more. And also, after a few months of doing that, potentially coming up on the main roster again as the brother of Kane, and by proxy, you was Undertaker, and I would be called Abel. That didn't last but like 30 seconds. That idea, by the way. But I did have to practice in this mask, and Jimmy's like, "Well, what do I do? You're taking my top baby face. You're putting a freaking hood on him. What are you doing?" And that was one of the many times Jimmy and his show would get completely screwed of just terrible booking by WWE. And I know what others will say. Well, you're being paid a lot of money, Matt, to learn to be a WWE superstar, W superstar. Right? Like their TV is more important than OVW TV. Yes, obviously it is. But by the same token, I would have just, do you know how much credit I would have, if I was a WWE writer, I would have taken so much credit by just taking these guys from OVW and just keeping them what Cornette had them as. Because I'm telling you, that Leviathan character was badass.
Oh yes, yes,
Badass.
absolutely.
Cena was amazing. And if he almost got fired by WWE until, he finally found his footing. But he was amazing promo. That wasn't something. Um, just I don't know. I can go on and on, but
Oh,
uh,
we could too,
but
for
that
sure.
brought up the mask and the hood gimmick, and Jimmy taking chicken shit and trying to make chicken salad the best he
Mm-hmm.
could.
I agree. Um, let me see. So we've talked to a lot of people, and I feel like I wish that people could have seen OVW more than just the Cena, Lesnar, Orton, Batista, and that's why we started doing this because of the Johnny Geners, the Seth Skyfires, the Mike Mondos, and
That Skyfire.
mhm.
Yeah,
All of those people. Like I've always felt like their career isn't defined by the 2 to 4 years that when WWE would bring you onto the main roster. Like that journey through OVW, because it was back then before YouTube, it was just like Kentucky, Anna, and then when they did the other developmentals, nobody really got to see the magic that they created down there. And there's so much talent that was from Brent Albright to everybody that should have been had a longer career than what they did. And
And the ones that didn't even make it up there, Smooth Johnny Spade, man, that guy was awesome.
very, very great. He's a heat magnet.
Yeah.
Johnny Heater and a half boy. I love Johnny Spade. Good dude in real life.
Mhm.
But what I was gonna say was, it, it, I used to think about the same thing you just said, right? And what you realize is WWE had such an influx of so much talent where they could, because people to this day are like, how could they have gotten you wrong? How could they have screwed your character up that bad? Why would they take a guy, you know, a so-called magna cum laude graduate or whatever they were saying I was, with a degree in public speaking, communications, and could talk? Why would they make him stutter? You know what I mean? Oh, it must have been a rib. No, it's the day Vince sold me on that stuttering character. I swear I tell everybody the same story because it is the same story. He wanted to originally think about putting that on Brock. I swear to God, on my. He told me this. He could be lying, but that's what he told me. But he thought I was confident enough to pull it off. Comfortable enough in my own skin, to make it to myself and not really care. Um, but if we're honest, that's where they got to a point where they had so much talent that they can afford to screw up, Chris Masters or Rene Dupree or me or Johnny Jeter or others that, quite frankly, if they booked us the proper way, and many wrestlers can say the same excuse, right? But if anybody watched OVW, the writing was on the wall for so many of us. You could see what our potential was, especially Renee and someone like Chris Masters.
mhm.
Unlimited. They were so young. They were teenagers when they were started. Renee Dupree should be a multiple time former world heavyweight champion by now. multiple. I would argue same with Masters, because they had everything.
Mm-hmm.
Talk, looked a million, could work. But they're just a few. There's so many people I can list, but that came from OVW, and they were just so overpopulated, so much talent that
Mm-hmm.
they could. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Then,
Yeah.
but real quick, I just want to add this. Do you realize then what ended up happening a few years later? Right now, I'm saying around 2007, 2008, 2009, if you'll remember, WWE was now struggling to find new superstars. They were doing that. Did ECW launch? That was weak. They did that new talent initiative. I remember for a hot minute, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't ready to be brought up to television, and just throwing shit against the wall to see what would stick.
Mm-hmm.
Out of that, we got a couple good ones, right? But
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, that's where they screwed the pooch with our crop of talent from that generation, that ruthless aggression age, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
because to stay in developmental, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. I think um, when they decided to pull away from the developmental territories is definitely when they really messed up because
Yeah,
they had such, like you said, such a crop to pull from, and I never thought of it that way. The way you said that they did have such a
100.
massive group to pull from that they could mess up with some of them and not worry about it.
Okay,
That's messed up to think about,
true.
but that's exactly what they did. They're like, well, we've got an unlimited fountain. We got a Golden Corral chocolate fountain of wrestlers right now. We're gonna dip a few marshmallows and throw a few away.
Yep.
Is what, yeah. And so yeah, that's really messed up to think, but that hits the nail on the head. I agree. Wow.
Yeah.
If there's any advice you could give to anybody getting into wrestling, what would it be?
Oh God. So
As
I'm joking. Um, it's a different day and age. Number to be a heel is not easy. It's almost like to get the kind of heat that you're supposed to try to go get from the audience and make them legit hate you.
mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That's now dead. Um, Only MJF and maybe a very few others that I can think of. And even the people that boo him, I don't necessarily think they're booing him. I think they're just very impressed with how good he is at being a heel, right?
Mm-hmm.
So different day and age today. So like what I would say is honestly, I hope you're up on the product today, but also that no matter what you decide to do, that you're gonna have to work your tail off for this. Um, and also going to do it for you. Do your own selling. Be on social media. Make videos. Cut promos. In fact, that's my advice right there. That's because this is what I used to do. I used to cut promo after promo after promo after promo in my bathroom mirror every morning after either showering or shaving. Um, every morning and also every night before going to bed. Watch my facials. Um, and this is before we can video ourselves on phones, right? Keith, that's how old I am. You want what you guys have your phones that you can do this with now. You can get stuff out on social media and catch up and catch fire with whatever that is that you produce now. So don't wait for somebody to come do it for you. You do it. Also be different. Everyone's also going to say that at all times. Try to be different. Um, be undeniable for like WWE. Give them something or AEW that they don't have right now. Don't copy what you see somebody else doing right now and think that you're going to get an opportunity. We already have too much of that. Be somebody. Try to be something and somebody different. You know.
I couldn't
Yeah,
agree more.
absolutely. It's you got to be unique, and it's hard to find, for sure. Um, but when somebody has that uniqueness to them, they definitely stick out like a sore thumb, and that's something that is lacking. And I agree with that 100%. I couldn't have said it better.
Well, I want to say thank you for coming on today, and thank you for everything that you've done for wrestling. We've got to see you from your start till today, and it's been amazing. And there's a lot of memories that I have from my childhood till to now, and I appreciate everything that you've done.
Thank you, brother. And I appreciate you both, and thank you for saying that. Um, very blessed, you know, very, very blessed. And for those that are in business right now, and like I retired in 2014. I retired the day my kid was born in the delivery room. I wasn't planning on that, and I don't know if people know this story or not, but I was going back to WWE January 2014. I was supposed to re-debut in the Royal Rumble that year. My little boy Jackson, who it took us 12 years to have, went through about 7 or 8 bouts of IVF with ICSI. It's like about 20 grand a piece. None of them work. Now, my wife gets pregnant. He's born January 7th, 2014, just like weeks before I was supposed to re-debut. And I was just holding him in the delivery room for the first time. The switch goes off in my head that I was not planning on. That I'm done. I can't. I don't want to spend the night away from this miracle that I've begged God for now, like 12 straight years, every night. You know. And so I called WWE. I thanked them for the opportunity. I even called TNA and thanked them because they gave me many years of being able to main event 6 pay-per-view, 7 pay, whatever it was, and get better, most importantly, and improve and show everybody who the blueprint was finally on national television, uh, right? But I tell you this because there's wrestlers out there that don't know what to do after wrestling. I'm now mayor in the city of Longwood. I first got elected 2017 to my first 3-year term at the time. For a 4-year term. My term will be up in 2024. But every year in the month of May, we pick who the mayor is going to be. And this will be my third. I just had gotten it the third time this past May. So now technically the mayor, right? And I say that because this was not in the cards for me. I hated politics and politicians. Hardly would even watch the news if I'm being real. Um, but I tell wrestlers this because you don't know what doors are in front of you out there. You just don't. So don't always put your eggs all in one basket, and try to be good to as many people as you could along the way. And again, most importantly, follow your heart and the things you want to do. To me, I always wanted to be a dad. Nothing was more important than that. Because I'm so passionate about wanting to be a dad to that little beautiful 8-year-old nonverbal autistic son of mine in that house right now. That's why I got into politics, because I wanted my thumbprint on the community that my little boy's going to grow up in. Then it just blossomed, snowballed from there. I know that sounds cheesy, but that's the truth. That's legit truth.
No.
And but
it's a
it
lot
just
of
goes to
respect.
But the point is, because I know hopefully some wrestlers will see. Don't think that once your career's done with pro wrestling or whatever it is, that's a problem. So many wrestlers are always stuck chasing that magic carrot that nobody puts themselves. We're the ones that put that in front of our own face. We're the ones that themselves were addicted to. That we're addicted to. It's the opportunity to get in front of an audience and make them feel something. It's the best feeling in the world. And I know you guys have heard that, right?
Oh yeah.
But I'm surrounded by guys when I was in OVW that are insanely intelligent and that have gone on to do some pretty impressive things after pro wrestling. I'm very proud of them. But to the younger guys that are watching right now, I'm not saying quit wrestling tomorrow or something, but what I'm saying is you never know what the future holds. Be good to as many as you can along the way, treat them like gold, and always follow your heart. And I promise the rest will take care of itself.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much for coming on. We do appreciate you taking the time. Know you're very, very busy. And I just want to say thank you for everything. And I hope you have a great evening.
Love you guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, it's Morty.
It's Brian.
And thank you for watching today's episode of Developmentally Speaking.
If you could, please click that subscribe button.
And don't forget to punch that bell icon so you can get notified whenever we go live or drop a new video every Monday. Well, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you on the next
Developmentally Speaking.